Your Excellency, Chief Marshal Sir Stephen Dalton. Thank you for your time. You're a very busy man, especially with the Remembrance Week coming up. I do appreciate it. You're one of the first guests I've had on the show where I thought I've got to do some research for this man. I knew your predecessor, Sir John McCall, and when I was looking at your background, I didn't realise you're a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still flying?
No, I decided after 42 years of a very, very rewarding flying that it was something you either had to do properly and continuously, or not to leave yourself open. I say to the idea that you can just pick it up and put it down, which you can't. So no.
Did you? So you joined up? If I'm correct in saying 76.
Nope, 72.
Oh, okay.
Because you joined before you went to university in those days,
right?
And then went to university for 3 years. And while you were there, they taught you to fly on the university air squadrons.
Did not know that.
So you did all your initial single engine, piston engine flying in those days on chipmunks, which fortunately are only available in short numbers these days in private hands, and learnt all the basics of flying, and did lectures and did lots of study on aeronautics.
Before you joined the RAF?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What were you first flying when you joined up?
Chipmunks, chipmunk T10.
That's when you joined as well.
Yep.
So fighters?
Yeah. No, they were a basic two-seat tandem.
Excuse my ignorance. I do apologise. Go on.
Two-seat tandem single propeller aeroplane, which used to fire up with like a rifle shot. You pull a ring and it would bang the engine into life, just like a rifle.
When so 72 you joined. That was 72 you joined.
Well, correct. And then went to university in 73.
Ah, I see. Where was uni?
Bath.
You're a Leicester lad, aren't you?
I was born in Leicester, yes. But
where would you call home?
Well, difficult question, that one. I spent half my life in Leicester and half my life in Berkshire, in just outside Reading, in a place called Sonning. So that was until I left to go to university, and then everywhere else you can care to name and think about across the world, as they say. Where did you get based? When you first joined up, what was your first posting? Where was your first base? Well, again, after training, up to a place called Coltishall, which was near Norwich.
I know Coltishall.
To join the Jaguar Force there in 78.
Piloting Jaguars?
Yes.
When you one of the things I've tried to work out with the RAF, I try to work out lots with the RAF. I've been Army. We especially infantry and especially paras, we become very ignorant to everything else. There's nothing outside of it. There's people who fly planes, there's people who sail boats, and as far as that's it.
There's people who throw themselves out of a perfectly serviceable airplane under a piece of silk. Explain that one.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I've stopped now. Up to what rank can you still fly?
Well, it depends what you mean, can you fly? I mean, I flew my last sortie in the front of a Typhoon on the very day before I left the Air Force in 2013. But I did have a proper qualified pilot in the back seat as well, because I just wasn't doing enough flying to be what you would call properly current at that stage. But yes, if you can remain physically fit, then you can keep going all the way through. And people do, up to 55. And then, as I did, when you leave, you then, with a bit of luck, be able to go and fly for the air experience flights, where you fly the Air Training Corps cadets and others to give them their first experience of flying, about 25 minutes per sortie for each cadet, perhaps a couple of times a year.
Is that in things like the Hawk?
No, that's back on things now called Grob Tutors, which are, again, single-engine, piston-engine aeroplanes. This is just to give people their first experience of flying. And for many people, the first experience ever of flying, which I discovered, which is fascinating in this day and age, but makes us very realise that some people still don't go on holidays, package holidays in an aeroplane, whatever.
Where were you doing that?
A place called Benson in Oxfordshire.
Ah, okay. I was going to say, because it was in Jersey with people not flying, isn't it? That's a pretty closeted life. I've got friends who've never left Wales at my age. I'm 36. So yeah, they've never left Wales. It's beggars belief. But then some people don't need that. They can just chill out and relax.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which I kind of admire in some ways. I kind of admire it. So but the Jaguars, were they came into service what, in the 60s?
Well, really, it was the very early 70s when they came into service to replace the Phantom as it went out of service. So really, early 71, 72 was the first sort of squadrons that were formed on the Jaguar, both in the UK, which there were some at Coltishall, and also in Germany, where there were some in Bruggen and some at Larbrook.
Did you move from Coltishall to anywhere else?
Yes, Larbrook, where I spent 6 years at Larbrook, flying the Jaguar out there, which was great fun. And it was, in those days, of course, the front line, unquote, where you were expecting that the Russian hordes would march across the inner German border at a moment's notice.
So what were your sorties like? Was it the same kind of sorties every day, or did they change?
No, they varied enormously, I have to say. That was the beauty of the airplane. It wasn't the most versatile in terms of performance, but it was incredibly capable of changing roles between reconnaissance, where we carry a reconnaissance pod with cameras and infrared sensors, all the way through to doing air-to-air firing with missiles on the aeroplane. But predominantly, it was a very stable, low-level aeroplane, which was predominantly used for attack, and in those days also, I have to say, tactical nuclear strike.
Ah, I didn't know that. So where were they? They
were in Bruggen. I mean, that's where the aircraft were based for that role in Bruggen. So, but fortunately, I managed to stay on the ground attack and reconnaissance aircraft all the time.
I suppose the nuclear strike crew would be a bit of a boring job.
It's when you, like anything where you're on standby, as you will well know, for something, if you're not careful, it can be really boring, because you're waiting for what you hope and probably know is very unlikely to happen. But if it was to happen, you've got to be able to go from 0 to 100% in about half a heartbeat. So it can be quite exciting, especially when someone does press the, hopefully, training button and off you go through the whole procedure. But most of the time, you're sitting there waiting for what you hope, will never come. So it can be, in reality, boring. But most of the time, you're just ready to go whenever the button comes.
What's the maximum length of a sortie you could do back in those days? I'm just thinking, health and safety wise these days, it'd be madness. But what was the longest sortie you did, time wise?
Unrefueled, as in we could do air-to-air refuelling. So with unrefueled, as in just with the fuel you took off with, typically be somewhere around an hour 45, maybe 2 hours. But if you air-to-air refueled, like going across the Atlantic or going across to America to take part in the big exercises there, then of course the aircraft would fly for 8 to 10 hours without any problem at all with 3 or 4 air-to-air refuelling brackets.
And you just pilot the whole way? No stops?
Yeah, but there's no autopilot in those airplanes in those days. You had to fly the aeroplane the whole way.
So I take the Typhoons then have autopilot?
Correct. You can plug in an autopilot system, and it will therefore fly a route without you having to actually put input to it, apart from when you want to do something dynamic like air-to-air refuelling, which you still can't do automatically yet.
How mentally draining is it to fly with the Jaguars? How is it?
Was it mentally draining? I have to say it probably was, but you didn't realise it at the time. You were just so busy doing the job. And the biggest thing was that every minute of every sortie, the aeroplane could surprise you and do things, and therefore you've got to be on top of it all the time.
What do you mean?
Well, because some alarm could be triggered in the aeroplane. 99.9% of the times are either false alarms, or they were just telling you things that the system was doing. But of course, you always had that eye to the fact that it could be something that was more serious than that. And it does happen. I mean, that's the nature of life. So you're always wary of that, in terms of when you're flying along. So mentally draining, yes, but as I say, really, most of the time you didn't realise that. You're just doing the job and you got on with it.
So how long did you stay with the Jaguars for?
From 78 through to 83, and then went off to 85, big one, and then went off to do some other jobs, and then came back to the Jaguar Force to run the whole thing when I managed to get promoted for about 2 years in the late 90s.
What rank were you then?
Group captain.
So explain that to me.
Okay, so a group captain is equivalent of a full colonel, and a group captain runs each of our bases. So the whole base is run by a group captain. And
like
until
Marshal?
Yes, until about 5 years ago, that meant you ran the force, i.e. the whole Jaguar Force, so all the engineers, all the admin, all the aircraft, all the flying, everything that happens on that base, you are responsible for.
did not know that.
And of course, overseas, if you were overseas, then of course you're also responsible for all the dependents, because they are legally posted in a way to the legal entity, which is the station commander, who's responsible for the whole thing.
Ah, so you mean if you posted overseas?
Yeah.
Got ya. So then all the families come under it as well.
Yeah. But obviously in the UK, none of that applies. It's the military people and what goes on the military side.
Mm-hmm. So when were you promoted to group captain?
Gosh, when I was promoted to group captain, it would have been in 94.
94. So you've been in, what, 14?
20 years.
20 years, yeah. 20 years.
Although actively, let's say 17 years after university.
Good going. What did you, like I said, I've been doing my research, what did you receive the QCVS for? And don't be modest about it. Don't be modest about it.
It's...
Please.
We were working on being able to fly the Jaguar Force with what was called night vision goggles.
Okay.
And as you know, these are electronic tubes through which you can see shades of green, and we did a lot of trials work and then some actual sort of missions where we wore the goggles in the Jaguar at low level to do some tactical reconnaissance and some attack flying. And I was on the original trials team for that. So it was a combination of taking a technical idea, making it work, and then going and actually employing it, at the end of which someone thought well enough of it to nominate me for a Queen's Com.
Congratulations. I was thinking, when you were talking night vision goggles, as you were talking through, I was thinking, I know all the problems with night vision goggles from just being on the ground with them. But in a fighter jet, I use a question for you with that then. So, I'm imagining that in the Jaguar, you had a heads-up display.
Yep.
And you had your normal dials and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did the pilots? How did you do it so that when the pilots, if they removed the night vision, or how could they see the dials and the heads-up display, but also have the night vision through the?
Okay. There are lots of bits and pieces to that. I mean, the basic one is that white light, green lights, and yellow lights just completely flare out their goggles. So we had to take out all of that. So all the instruments and all the displays had to have what was called a blue-green 7 filter put over the top of them.
Okay.
And that meant that it didn't bloom the goggles to a point where you couldn't see anything. But technically to be flying, we used the head-up display as the major reference, because it has your speed, your height, your angle, your attitude, and everything is in there really. And the goggles, of course, were focused at infinity, and that, of course, is where the head-up display is focused as well. So you can look through the head-up display, through the goggles, and get all the information you need for most of what you do. We could see underneath to look at things like the fuel gauges and the engine instruments and that sort of thing.
Ah, but with the what were the filters called? Sorry,
blue-green 7.
The blue-green 7 filters, were they removable for daytime missions?
You ask a very good question. Because in the manual of aircraft safety, the absolute bottom rule is that the master caution in every aeroplane has to be red.
The what?
Master caution. So anything happens that's going to cause an alarm, an alert, whatever, and the first thing happens is a big red flashing light comes up on the coaming.
Okay. Now,
it can be for something quite minor, which you can just ignore or deal with without a problem at all. It can also be for something major, like an engine failure and so forth. So it has to be in red. So we had to get a huge dispensation to make that into the blue-green glass, because that meant that you could fly with it by night. But it was never clear to fly by day. So if we were diverted, which I was once, we then couldn't fly the airplane back, because technically, I mean, you could fly the airplane, of course, but technically we weren't allowed to, because that caution wasn't red for flying by day. So it had to all the instrumentation and everything had to be adjusted, but purely by putting a filter over the top of it, so that the light that came out was this blue-green light rather than red or yellow, which would have bloomed the goggles and made it really difficult to fly.
They would have been first generation night vision then, would they?
Yes. Second generation was what we quickly went on to, and eventually ended up with third generation ones.
Yeah.
But you may know that the problem of keeping them in focus, the problem of them working, where to put the batteries, In the early days, they were powered by AA batteries,
Yeah.
and they had to go on a pack on the back of your helmet.
Right.
And the actual goggles were fitted on the front on a butterfly mounting on the front of the helmet.
Heavy.
Very good neck muscles at the end of.
No, yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, against that quality, I'm thinking of the quality of that night mission must have been epic trying to fly a plane with that. Did any adjustment have to be made for the ejection system for that?
Interesting question. No, was the answer originally. What we had was, as I say, was this butterfly-shaped catch on the front. So you fitted them on a bracket on the helmet, and if we had to eject, then because of the momentum that would be caused by the goggles, as you went up, your head would be brought down, and of course the chances of doing some really bad stuff to your neck. You would aim to use both hands to hit the butterfly or catch on the front of the helmet and literally force the goggles over towards the coaming before your hands went down and pull the handle.
Coaming?
The shield that goes above the instruments but below the cockpit glass. So in other words, you can see, like a dashboard, you can see through the top of it, over the top of it, so it keeps the instruments covered, but you've got a space between that and the actual glass of the aircraft.
I've got you. Were they heated, Jaguars?
Heated?
Yeah. Or cooled?
Yes. I mean...
Did they have air-con?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Some of the sorties we did up in the Arctic, 250, a place called Bardufoss in North Norway. Okay. If you had got it heated or cooled, I mean, you could, cooling was a bit of a problem up there, but heating was definitely the order of the day, because otherwise you'd be, pretty darn chilly inside the airplanes.
I'd never been in one. I've been in one. My sister was in the Air Cadets when she was younger.
Okay.
She's still part of the Air Cadets, I think. She's a few years younger than me in some role. She flew in a Hawk, so I asked about the Hawks.
Right.
But she had an experience flying a Hawk up in
Valley?
Might be in RAF
North
Valley,
Wales, yeah.
Yeah, I
Count Anglesey is North Wales, do you? In terms of your point of view, being a Welshman.
I consider myself a South Wales. I only consider myself in the North when I'm going to see like Snowdonia and the scene of Godfather, and so the less said about that end, the better. I was going to say the South. Then we'll talk about the South. I didn't realise with the Air Cadets either. In fact, you're quite heavily involved with the cadets here.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
so
yes,
I didn't realise with the Air Cadets that when you can get a commission through the cadets, a Queen's commission through the cadets. She did it.
Yes.
Explain that one to me. I didn't understand that.
But it is what's called a volunteer reserve commission. So hence they have the VR badge on their lapel.
Right.
And it's specifically for that. But yes, it is. It's equivalence of, but it's not in the regular Air Force. If you wanted to come in the regular Air Force or the TA in the Army, then you would have, or the reserves in the Army these days, you would have to go and do a separate course to prove that actually you were capable of doing that job full time, as opposed to doing it in relation to the youngsters and looking after them.
That makes sense. She's adjutant. No, not AGC. What's the branch of the services that are lawyers?
Oh, yes, the Director of Legal Services team. Yes, I know.
Yeah, she'll kill me. That's where she is now. She went off and did
might prosecute you.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did a Sanders a couple of years back, but. No, she loved it. What's your involvement with the cadets then at the moment?
Well, now, I obviously technically I'm what's called the Commander in Chief for the Island of Jersey as well for all the military forces here. So naturally enough, the cadets, I think, are an incredible organisation. All three service cadets are incredible organisations that do great things for youngsters and give them great opportunities, and you talk to them, and they are just so pleased to be part of it. And for an island the size of Jersey, the number of them are in the cadets, whether it be the Army, Marines, sailors, or the Air Training Corps, is actually quite surprising. And then you add the CCF on top of that, then all of a sudden you've got a heck of a lot of youngsters who are involved in the cadet scene.
One of the things that struck me, this is my third time in my adulthood I've been to Jersey. I've been there a few times when I was a kid. I had family here. One of the things that struck me the previous two times I've been over is how much support, and I don't say pro-military, it's a source, this is wrong. How much support there is for the military, for the UK Armed Forces. And the reason it surprises me is because there isn't a big presence of military here. I only discovered today you got the Royal Engineers here. I didn't know that when Richard Woodhouse drove me past. But it's sort of I've been trying to understand it. Why that support is there? Can you have a look? Explain?
I think the first thing is that they are still here in Jersey very conscious of the fact that it was the British forces that came to liberate them in 45, and the fact that in 1916 the Jersey boys, the Jersey lads, contingent went across to serve with the British forces in the Somme and Passchendaele and. So they're very conscious of the fact that they have contributed people in the past to particularly the armed force, particularly the army, but also Navy and Air Force. And they still have this connection with the armed forces, but through the Crown as well. I mean, their desire to still be associated with the British Crown is really important to them. They are.
Why is that?
I think it's because they see it as their guardian of independence. Because technically, of course, Jersey is in Great Britain, Northern Ireland, dominions overseas. It's not part of the United Kingdom.
Okay.
So when it comes to laws, every law that enacts here is passed by the Jersey states and enacted by the Royal Court here. They're not ruled by the law from the UK.
Ah.
But the laws to come into action still have to go to the Privy Council, to the Queen, just like our laws do in the UK, to get endorsed. Without that, they don't become law. People forget that quite a lot of the time still.
Interesting you mentioned about the independence thing. That sort of, I immediately thought the Falklands. I thought, if they weren't, what's the
difference is that the Falklands and places like some of the islands in the Caribbean are technically what's called overseas territories.
Yeah.
Whereas Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man are Crown dependencies. And the difference is, therefore, that they've run themselves under a constituted democratic system, effectively the same as UK, and at the end of it, it all comes together at the Crown and the Privy Council.
So how are so you have elections here then?
Yes, just had general elections across the island in May.
For who? Explain to me how it works.
Okay, here there are the states, as it's called, is their parliament. It's the states because there used to be 3 categories of people who were elected to it. For example, the rectors, the heads of each of the parishes. Rectors. So the chief priest, if you like, in the Church of England, in each parish, used to be in the states.
Okay.
The connotab, the elected head of the civil authority within each parish, is in the states today.
Okay.
And so now what we have, the 3, and some of that changed in the last 40 years, surprise. So now today we have 3 categories. They are the connotables, in other words, the head of the parish authority is in the states, so there's 12 of them. Mm-hmm. There are senators elected island-wide, and there are 8 of those. Senators. Yeah. So they are elected by the population across the island. And then the others are called deputies, and they're elected by population density. So, for instance, in St Mary's, which is one of the parishes here, least dense of all the population of all the parishes, they have 1 deputy. St Helier, which of course is the town, if you like, here, has the biggest density of people, and they have 9 deputies that sit in the states. And all the others come according to the population densities around the island. So you end up with 48 in the states.
What is the population of the island?
About 107,000. It's about 60,000, 70,000 permanent British citizens of Jersey, and then quite a lot of workers from Madeira, from Poland, from other parts of Europe, who come in to do particular jobs. I mean, some guys just come in to do seasonal work, like Jersey Royal Potatoes. Without the seasonal workers, Jersey Royal Potatoes, which you must have heard of.
Yeah.
Are absolutely, the iconic image in many ways. Alongside the Jersey cow, of course.
The cow, yeah. I was having a coffee in Richard's house earlier, and I opened the fridge to get the milk out, and it was the Jersey dairy and the cow, and I'd forgotten all about it. Not forgotten. Well, yeah, I'd forgotten about it. Picked it out. I love being here. Yeah. 107,000 people, give or take, population, and Brian was saying to me earlier that the poppy appeal raises between 100,000 and 200,000 a year.
Yes.
That's a staggering amount compared
People
to the...
are incredibly generous here.
That's just part of the military support I was talking about.
And if I'm honest, then people have this image of Jersey that everyone's a millionaire. Well, it's just so far from the truth. There are people here who are very wealthy, of course there are. But the vast majority of the cross-section of the population is just like anywhere else you go in Europe. We have some people who are literally having to rely on state benefits to survive here. But you've got a whole raft of people in the middle, of course, who've got very good jobs and are being paid well for what they do. Those who've got money tend to be quite generous here in giving that to charitable endeavours. And there's an enormous amount of charity. There's some crazy, crazy things that people do to raise money for charities. We walk around the island once a year.
I've heard about this.
People swim around the island.
That's a relay race, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
People row from here to Sark.
This is for the Poppy Appeal?
No, this is for all sorts of charities.
Okay. Yeah.
But for the Poppy Appeal, people will do amazing things as well. And it's great to see that willingness to give. And when they have got money, then they're very happy to give the money. When they haven't got money, and I say there's quite a fair proportion that would find it difficult to give more than literally a few pounds away, they'll give time. So they'll do these things.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic, I have to say. You can't but be bowled over here by that willingness to do something for others who are less fortunate in either money or time.
Okay, so where my experience of that support and generosity towards armed forces that's a part of that general attitude. Yeah, I wonder if that's having that culture is one of the benefits of having a small population, on a sealed off island, and I wonder that the bigger you get, they just lose that. It's a very close knit. Richard can name me about 50 people on the road from the airport to their houses.
And he is, and there's he and the pair of them are incredible when you think about the time they give. I mean, people here. I mean, the RBL idea is really popular here. So is RAFA, the Royal Air Force Association. So is the Seamen's charity. I mean, it's amazing how Seafarers Charity. It's amazing how much and how good people are when it comes to trying to support the military charities. But of course, Dalton do fantastic work with this Holidays for Heroes, which has got nothing to do with Help for Heroes. It's completely separate from it. They started it 10 years ago, and I mean, the people that come across come very suspiciously. They're quite anxious about coming. Some bring the families, some don't, and so forth. And they arrive here quite nervous. These are big, hefty men, most of them, who've done some pretty interesting things in their lives. And you can see on the first night just how nervous they are. And then subsequently, when they find out that the population on the island, let's take the Hells Angels lodge here, just as an example.
Is there Hells Angels?
They turn out on I think it's the Wednesday night of each week when people are here, and take people off around the island on the backs of their bikes. And if you happen to be unfortunate enough to have lost a leg or two legs and an arm, they'll find a way of strapping you to that bike and take them off. They're brilliant. People turn up with their cars on the second morning and offer to take people off around the island to show them the different parts of the island and so forth.
That's when you're saying about the people that come along for the Holidays for Heroes. I'm doing a podcast with Richard tomorrow.
Okay,
I'm really
good.
happy about
good,
it.
good. Yeah.
That's how this came about, actually. He was the first choice.
I'm very sorry.
You were second. Joking. Is that when you're saying the surprise that sort of come across a bit nervous? What Jersey Island? Why am I going there? On the island of Jersey. It's the same, and then they realise all the support. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Where it astounds me. I've only my third time out, and it gets me every time. It's hard to explain. When I first heard of Holidays for Heroes, which is really a relatively unknown organisation in the UK. It really
Absolutely.
is. It really is.
Sure.
And I started telling people about it. Holidays for Heroes. You want to meet Richard and Dawn? The stuff they do. So when I left here last time, all I want to do is phone them up. Anything you need, because they run it out of the desk. Got a desk in the house. Anything you need. What do you need? Because all the stuff they do.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, that's replicated across the island from whether people donate in time or money or or whatever it may be, turn out in the streets to clap the motorbikes going past. There's a big motorbike ride that goes on, isn't there?
Correct.
Remind me of that one.
The big ride out.
Big ride out. Yes.
And it starts at a place called St Catherine's Wharf, which was built by. In fact, there's quite an Irish population here because they came across to build that wharf in the Napoleonic times, and a lot of them stayed. And it was going to be a big naval base over there, protectorate from the weather, because it's on the east side of the island and so forth, and facing France, when we used to be worried about France and so forth. And they got the first big wall built, and you can see it from space. It's that big, and it's about just over 1.5 kilometres long. This wall. And so every year in May we have the big ride out, and this year there were 1,112 motorbikes, or dare I say scooters as well, on that wharf, of which 2 were 3-wheelers, but the rest were traditional. I mean, some fantastic bikes, I have to say. Yeah. But yes, people come from Germany, from France, of course from England, but all over the place to come and join in this ride. And then they set off. Takes about 20. When I start them off, it takes about 27 minutes for them all to go past. Right. And then they set off around the whole south end of the island and end up on the west coast for lunch and coffee and whatever over there. Very civilised, Hells Angels. Very civilised.
I've seen some video clips of it. I couldn't remember what it was called. France. So how do people get here from Germany?
Come across on the ferry from Saint-Malo in France. The ferry normally twice every 24 hours it comes across from Saint-Malo. So they ride across there and then come across.
There's a ferry here as well, isn't there? There's a ferry here from UK, isn't there?
Oh yes, there is. Yeah. The Liberation, it's called, is a high-speed one, and the Clipper is a traditional 10-hour journey. But the high-speed one will do 3.5 hours to here.
The first time I came, I flew to Jersey. I was going to a wedding in Guernsey, and we got the catamaran.
Yes,
across the
Liberation.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? Yeah. This would have been. Well, how long has that been going for? The Liberation.
10-ish years.
Oh no, we're talking late 80s.
Oh right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, late 80s. Late 80s we're talking. And it was, was it early 90s? Choppy. The sea was choppy.
The waters around here are notorious because off the southeast corner of Jersey there's a landmass there, colloquially known as Moon Country, but it's actually huge.
And is that the black rock you fly over? Sorry to interrupt.
No. There's several different areas here. This in the southeast is where a lot of ships have fallen foul trying to cut the corner as they've come around the east side of the island to get to St Helier, the main port, of course. And over the years, lots of ships have come aground there in a cropper and had to be rescued and so forth. But out to the northeast of the island, there's a set of islands called the Equihos, where there are some permanent huts for people to stay in, but when the tide is up, you're pretty well cut off from everybody else. And I mention that because this is the second highest tidal reach, i.e. between low tide and high tide, in Europe here.
Third highest in the world, isn't
Correct.
it? Yes.
Correct.
Another. Richard doesn't stop talking. Yeah, another fact, yeah.
And it goes out miles. And there is a famous tower on the southeast corner called Seymour's Tower, which is one of those Napoleonic built to provide early warning and a bit of defence out there. And the people have been trapped there overnight. And it's a long way out. It takes you a good 3 hours to get out there.
That far?
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Because that's so shallow going out there that when the tide goes out, it goes out at speed. When it comes back in, it then covers you. And, of course, the tidal reach is about 13 metres at the highest. I mean, it's varies between about 8.5 and 13.
That is huge. So, what's your history of the island like?
Is this going to be an exam? You didn't say that.
No, I was just thinking, who was the first known inhabitants, and who colonised it?
We think it's a mixture between Portuguese and English as we were going round it. But undoubtedly, the first people to come across here would have come across what we know today as Normandy and Brittany. Yeah. Just because of geographical reasons. Yeah. I mean, they tell me that 50,000, 60,000 years ago, between here and France was merely a river. whereas now, of course, it's a huge ocean, and you used to be able to walk to Guernsey at low tide, but that's a humongous amount of time ago. There's a team here recently digging up part of the 50, 60,000 year ago, and they found fire sets built on top of each other, and they found stones, flints, that were clearly those that had been shaped to scrape the meat and fat off of the skins of the animals they caught here, to take the skins back and leave the rest here.
Did you say 56,000 years ago?
Yes.
Oh, goodness me, I didn't think it would have been that long ago to be colonised.
It's amazing. And so I say tourism has existed here in Jersey for 50,000 years.
It's doing well. Yeah, flip the neck. What were we talking about before that? We were talking before we started about. I noticed on your shelf the red arrows, and the rocket in the middle.
Yep.
And we were talking about space, your aerospace connection,
Mm-hmm.
and someone else alluded to it as well. What's obviously I know that, so RAF pilot, astronauts, stuff like that. I'm not saying that's a connection, all right? Not saying that's a connection, or that you ever were a space cadet. But what is what's your interest in it?
Well, it's been a lifelong, effectively. I mean, I went to university and read aeronautical engineering because it was something that I'm a practical sort of guy, and therefore engineering was an obvious thing to go and do. But because of love of aviation and space and so forth, what's not to love about it? The idea that you might be able to, and people have now, of course, fly off to a different body. In this case, the moon so far, but the rest will come. What more could you possibly want to do in life than have an opportunity to go and do that? Absolutely, world changing for you. But it's because I think that there's so much that can be gained from exploring space and understanding how to use it, and so not leaving rubbish up there, which is what we're doing at the moment, but actually making sure we're doing something positive with that. So aerospace came part of early life, as they say. And I've seen the growth, of course, of satellites over the years. The idea now that you can take off in an ordinary aeroplane, as effectively Richard Branson's Virgin Galactica is in essence, and then fire something up that will go up. And the tourism is, of course, something that is grabbing headlines. And, of course, it's all the big celebrities. I'm sure you've paid your money and are going to have a go at it. But, I mean, it's all those people who do that. But, of course, the business model downstream is launching what they call low Earth orbit satellites. These are microsatellites, and they self-synchronise and produce the effect of a big satellite, but for a much shorter amount of time because they're much lower down. But if you wanted to do something for, 9 months to cover Olympics, say, then that would be a cheap way of putting up a particular satellite capability to cover that just for those 9 months. And then when it's gone, they would fall back into the atmosphere, get burnt up, and that's the end of it. I was not expecting the conversation to go this way.
So I will. After there's two people I know that you find really intriguing, and I'm sure I asked about space as well because I share an interest in it. One of them is a good friend of mine called John Vickers. So Blue Abyss, which you've heard of, commercial astronaut training centre, the world's first. The other guy is a guy called Paul Godonis, who is director of enterprise for Inmarsat.
Oh yes.
So you got John, John who does the astronaut training, and you got Inmarsat who did a satellite. So yeah, no, I share an interest for it, a real good interest for it. One of the interesting things, just this morning I was reading actually, was, and I genuinely didn't know we were going to go this way. The conversation was obviously Elon Musk has said that he wants to put people on Mars. I can't remember what his latest target is. What is the year? Is it 2022?
He said within 5 years, which is probably more than a little aggressive.
Pushing it, but he's known for that, isn't he? He's known for that.
I mean, you have to take your hat off to the man because he has done a lot that people say would never be done, in their lifetime, and he's done it. I certainly think it will be technically doable within 10 years, because I'm sure that between the various nations and now enterprises that are doing space work, that's all doable. It's simply getting to the point where you can do it reliably and as safely as is acceptable.
Yeah, I just remembered where I was reading about it. I bought it in the airport in Birmingham. I bought his book, biography. Yeah, I was looking for something. I thought, I haven't read a book for a while. I thought I'll buy that, and it was in there. But he was saying,
for an experiment.
I know. Yeah, thank you very much. I used to read a lot. It was saying there. He was basically his which leads into why the 2022 sort of target, or within the 5 years, he's saying that his worry is that he says we need to colonise before the end of his life. If we don't do it that soon with stuff, so he wants that's his mission. We're going to put, if nothing else, I'm going to put people on Mars. It's done then, and then you can build off of that kind of thing, which is really interesting. But I mean, people like Branson and Virgin Galactic, misleading. I mean, that Virgin Galactic doesn't go into space.
No, but the rocket does get on the edge of space.
But the people don't.
No. The people who pay to go get onto the edge of space, but for only about 90 seconds.
I don't think they even passed the
90,000 feet.
Yeah, I don't. Pardon?
90,000 feet.
Yeah, I don't think they get that high up.
They get right onto the edge of space at 90,000 feet. That's exactly where it goes.
Okay.
The other people, which of course is a brilliant addition to his plan, now sit in the aeroplane, which is the one with the jet engine that takes off with. They sit in there and they can watch from there. So you pay whatever it is, $250,000 to go in the rocket that will get up to there. Yeah. Now we can debate, whether that's trans space or interspace or whatever, but in effect, the definition says if you get up to that height, you're in space.
It's a step forward.
You can see the curve through the Earth, shall we say? Now, but I say that's a bit of a gimmicky thing for celebrities to do. The real thing is, and what's the future in that? And there are now companies who are starting to apply for licenses to operate a combination of jet rocket engines from the UK to start going into low Earth orbit space. And that's all doable now.
For what purpose?
To put satellites up there.
So we're looking at this places we're looking at aren't these North Wales and Scotland and Cornwall.
Scotland, really. The trouble is with anywhere in the south of the country, you've got to look at the safety trace and the fall of anything that happens.
Okay.
So that's why Scotland is a much better place for it to happen. Sorry to say this to Wilson. Scotland is a much better place for it to happen because, of course, the water out over the west there is so, and the north is just clear. So if anything was to happen, it would fall in the ocean. It wouldn't fall on land of either Welsh, English, Scottish, or Irish. Mm-hmm. So you've got to look at the fall of where things might go wrong.
I thought they were looking at two.
They've looked at 3 sites.
I thought they were looking at having 2 ports, so I got it completely wrong.
Well, they've looked at a place called, it used to be called RAF St Morgan in my day, down in near Newquay, and now called Newquay International.
Okay.
Which is an interesting name for it. They then looked at Aberporth, which is the old range that we used to have on the west coast of Wales.
Which one was that? By Castlemartin?
Halfway up.
Was it? I was thinking Castlemartin in the south. Yeah.
Sorry, I meant air-to-air weapons range, which can fire the air-to-air missiles over the sea off of Aberporth. And operate the target drones that used to come out of, they were drones as opposed to UAVs, but we can have a discussion about that if you like. And they used to come out of Aberporth and then we'd fire against the target that they used to tow out of the back of them. And they've looked at West Scotland. And West Scotland is probably the most likely because of the safety points of view and its remoteness from populations.
Mm. Yeah, most of Scotland isn't it?
Lovely place.
UAV and drones. What's the difference?
Okay. Everyone, and the media in particular, calls anything that flies without a pilot on board it a drone. And they are very, very different categories of air vehicles. So, technically, they're unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, when they're being controlled by someone probably on the ground, but can be on a ship or whatever. Whereas a drone is something that goes off and is pre-programmed to fly a route, and it flies that route and comes back.
Like a doodlebug.
Like a doodlebug.
I see. Yeah, that definition will probably change. If people just keep saying drone.
But drone is the easy terminology, and the media in particular picked up on it because it's an easy word and they think everyone knows it. And it sounds rather intimidating, doesn't it? But actually, of course, it means, like we're doing, droning on. And it's actually to do with the fact that people don't understand the technical, but also the human dimensions of somebody who's flying an air vehicle. Whether on the ground or in the air, quite frankly, is very much akin to the fact that they're flying this air vehicle and they're responsible for it. Whereas once you send a drone off, it's going to fly that route and hopefully come back, but you are sending it off regardless.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any experience with that UAV piloting?
Yes, yeah, very much so. I mean, when the Air Force introduced them 10 years ago now, more than 10 years ago, we had people out in America learning to fly the Predators, as they were, which were American designed and built air vehicles, and they had to drive a long way into the desert in those days to control them, to make sure they were out of sight. But it was psychologically, you could not be impressed by these youngsters who were so focused on the job they were doing, it was very real to them. And of course,
pilots.
Pilots, and they had two people normally flying them. One was with the pilot, and the other would be the sort of systems operator on that vehicle. But of course, they had cameras, so they could see precisely where they were looking at, what was going on. They could observe in north of Afghanistan. I remember the classic there was a young U.S. Marine lieutenant who'd got a small detachment of guys in an observation post. He was faced one day with some locals being incited, about 50 of them, to come up the hill to where this observation post was with their sort of farming implements, so nothing terribly military as ever, because they had been incited that they were doing something with the Quran up in the camp, and they'd sort of thrown some copies around and whatever, and so the people were going up, and there he was saying, "What do I do? How do I stop these farmers coming in here and taking it all out on us? I can't shoot them. I can't, and it was a question of how do we find something to do it? And what they actually did was to call in one of the drones to observe it, and then they referred it to the UAV because what they needed was something to do, something go bang, so that people realised that there was something up there that could actually affect them. And literally, with these people sort of about half a mile away from the observation post, with the first 5 US Marines trying to sort of physically stop them. They then sent a missile off that actually exploded about a quarter of a mile away, which told them that something up there could do something much more. And that was, and the people who were flying that, at the end of it, they were, really focused on the fact that they had just probably saved those guys' lives. But at the same time, they had to be really careful, because if they'd gone wrong, they could equally have killed some civilians, and then they'd have been in a whole lot of trouble.
It's an interesting subject, actually, with the UAV pilots. I was just thinking there about when you said young, how young they could be or are now. I'm guessing early 20s, I'm guessing.
Yes, now you can join the Royal Air Force and go straight into flying UAVs. So you can be 22, 25 age. But also, some people are taken out of having done some real fast jet flying and put onto it, or from some of the systems aeroplanes and put onto it. It really is another career option there. And providing you understand what the possibilities are and what the risks are, it's a great tour to do, and people love it. Absolutely love it.
I wonder if for the Predators, for example, or whatever they've got now, with the armed UAVs, I wonder if there's a sort of a stricter criteria to do with experience and maturity, if you like. But that kind of thing where you have to meet a certain criteria, stricter criteria to fly those, and because you might have to fire a shot in anger, poor expression, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Are you aware of anything?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The whole point of when you go from, for instance, in flying, when you go from flying an aeroplane simply to academically learn to fly an aeroplane, to then going to an aeroplane which has weapons on board, there's a whole raft of approaches and assessments that are done to make sure that you're the right sort of person who is going to know how to do this, is going to be able to do it, willing to do it, but also knows when to and when not to, because if you get that wrong, you could be in serious trouble. And the same is done with the UAV operators, because they know that if you're involved in this for 10 hours, 12 hours, which you can be, and then when you leave, unlike many of the other elements of firing long-range weapons and so forth, whether from the ground, from a ship, from an aircraft, whatever, you might never see the effect directly yourself. In this case, the UAV operators will see precisely what they've done, because the camera will still be on the spot when the weapon hits. That's essential it is, because then we can demonstrate that actually it did exactly what it said on the tin and did the job that it was meant to do. Yeah. So yes, I mean, these people see exactly what happens, and the psychology of all that is really important to get right. So yeah, there's a lot of work done to make sure that people understand what they're doing and have got the right character and right sensibilities to do it.
The risk of public backlash against it is so big as well. If something goes pear-shaped, it's such a controversial way of operating, seen as such a controversial way of operating, because of that detachment from the pilot to the vehicle. The vehicle.
Yep. I mean, you say that, and I absolutely know that the people who operate them are as focused on what they're doing as if that little pink body was about to have a 7.62mm bullet at them. They're absolutely focused on it. When they leave, when they do those missions, when they finish them, and they've had to fire a weapon to achieve an effect, if you achieve the effect, that's great. If it hasn't achieved the effect, or they've not been able to do it, or they have to steer the missile away from it because at the last minute in flight they can see that a civilian may have come out of a house or whatever. You only have to talk to these people to know this isn't some sort of computer game. This is real, and they know it's real.
Yeah, it strikes a chord with me with that control of such firepower, regardless of your service. And I think this is a thought I'm literally just having now, in that especially the Army's concerned, it could be much, from my past experience, they could or should do more to have stricter procedures in place for the bigger armaments that you're in charge of. I as an example, I've witnessed a couple of things I did a few tours of Afghan out there where there were people in positions that did not have the 100% attitude that the pilots you're talking about did or do, in that very much more blasé in the way they called in some things. I'm not talking about from my own unit in Power Edge. I'm not talking about from my own unit. I'm not saying that I didn't exist in the unit, just from my experience. I'm talking about things like JDAMs, 500-pounders, 1,000-pounders, 2,000-pounders. Witness things where, in the aftermath, it's been, okay, flipping out. Well, okay, you hit that building, and we're lucky that there was no one in there, or that situation's okay. But leading up to that event, you should not have called in that strike. Because if I'm sitting here listening to what's going on, and I mean, one of the incidents, I was a sniper, and I was giving the information, but relaying the information back, and what I could see, what I thought should happen, and what I thought shouldn't happen, and my perception of the events going on. And the next thing is an airstrike being called in. I'm saying, what? No, shouldn't be happening, but it comes in anyway. Because I think in that situation, no, don't get me wrong, there was no civilians killed or anything like that.
Yeah,
but it was a waste of munitions, at the very least. But imagine there had been something else going on, right? What the fuck are you doing? I can see more than you. You can't see. Listen to what I'm telling you. The guy was an officer. No offence. He was a bad attitude. He had a bad attitude on him, and in bad I mean that he thought he knew everything. And I had more experience, and there was a reason I had more experience, and the reason I was the one giving the information back, and he was the one, because that was my job and I was good at it. But he wanted it was not brownie point. It was a notch in the barrel, a notch in the barrel. He was one of those people who said, "I'd call in this many missions, these 5 missions," and this and the other. It's unfortunate, but you.
Well, as you know, people also You never know how people are going to react until you're actually in the situation.
That's the other thing.
And there's nothing you can do.
Absolutely.
You can do a lot to get training. You do a lot to give them a lot of experience. But of course, at the end of the day, when it comes to your little finger on that button, that trigger, that radio, whatever, then you may do things that actually in another life you wouldn't have done. But and what is, I think, important is to have checks on the characters of people, when they're in those situations. And the only way to do that is to put them in a live situation and see, that they can cope.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the worst people I've ever experienced in camp, officers and non-commissioned. Then we've gone on a tour, and they've been hated. They've been hated in camp. Normal, and you go on a tour like the Afghan tours, and all of a sudden, they become the best things since sliced bread, because in the thick of it, where in camp they were just a pain in the arse. But when it comes in the thick of it, and you're in the poo, and their attitude changes, and all of a sudden they're all about the team, all about the blokes, and they stand up for your left, right. It doesn't matter what their commander thinks. Amazing people. You got to stick people in the thick of it. How would you manage that, though? It's a difficult one.
It is, but again, I would also say that I think we're very lucky as human beings, is that one of the beauties of doing work with people, of living with people, is that we're all different.
Yeah.
And my goodness, wouldn't it be a boring world if we were all this, that, and the other, and so it is. Then there's horses for courses, and I think as always, you hopefully got the opportunity to choose which particular horse you run on which particular course on which particular day. If you don't have that choice, then life's a lot more limiting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's go back to space a minute.
Yeah.
Question for you on Musk. He's got this idea. Now I'm going to ask you, because you are a man with the knowledge, right? Being a pilot and being a very intelligent individual, and your knowledge of space, and you're a member of the Royal
Aeronautical Society.
Yeah. A member?
Well, I eventually became the president.
Oh, really? I apologise.
I now look at many of these things as a past president rather than the current one. Yeah.
Amazing. Right, so there we go. His idea to have a transport that is rocket powered, that goes between cities or between countries, right? I can't see how that will work.
You're not a member of the Flat Earth Society, are you?
No, I'm not. Absolutely not. I'm not. I'm not. I might become a member just to get some laughs. They had the convention in Birmingham. They have an annual convention that happens in Birmingham. It happened a few months back. I was nearly going to go, but no, I'm not. I can't see. Here's why I can't see how that can work commercially, with just Joe Blogs going, I'll have a ticket to Birmingham, please, from Jersey, for example. Vertical takeoff, vertical landing, because of the G-forces involved. Explain to me, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it won't be between Jersey and Birmingham. Or Birmingham. We are talking long distance. So he's talking about having the ability to get an aeroplane, let's call it an aeroplane, from San Francisco to Sydney or San Francisco to Tokyo in 45 minutes. That's what he's claiming.
Okay, I didn't know that.
That's what it's about. But he's talking about doing conventional takeoffs and then speeding up once you're airborne. So he would do a conventional takeoff from an airport. It would then become rocket powered when you're airborne, and go up and do like a sort of projectile, hyperbola, go up and then come back down again in that way.
I didn't know that.
So it's not like sitting on top of a rocket like Saturn V and the whole thing, banging away. And no, that would put most members of the public off, I have to say. Yeah. No, he's talking about taking off conventionally and then going up and getting to hypersonic speeds and coming back down.
And landing conventionally?
Yes. No, not going down on a parachute. I know you chaps are paranoid about these things, but not my favourite form of landing, by the way. But that's up to you.
It's not mine. I thought you were talking about vertical takeoff and landing. That makes more sense then. But if that's the case, why haven't we seen that kind of rocket-powered technology already with the history of
engines?
Right.
And as you say, an environment inside that doesn't feel like you're about to put your spacesuit on with space helmet and all the rest of it and so forth. One of the issues will be, depending what height he eventually the model says they've got to go to, is every passenger going to have to wear pressurised breathing equipment, for instance, or is they going to make the vessel so strong in that sort? But then that's going to add weight and all that. We've really got to see the details of what he's proposing in terms of the vehicle, because people used to get worried about flying in Concorde.
Yeah.
Remember, that was flying at 70,000 feet and Mach 2.
Yeah.
There's a couple of models of aeroplane that are being built right now, one in Japan and one in the US, that will replicate that again, but one of them is talking about going at Mach 4.
4 times the speed of sound.
Yes.
Right.
And there's a program called, there's an aeroplane they're going to call Boom, which strikes me as being rather interesting name, but anyway, there it is. And they're going to go and do passenger flying for about 60 people in this, and they're going to call it Boom, and they're going to make it work economically as a business model and all the rest of it.
Mach 4.
Mach 4.
But so there's another problem. I'm just conscious of your time. We need to wrap up in a minute. There's a problem with this, again, right, which was one of the problems I saw with the vertical takeoff and landing, which doesn't exist anyway. It's not what he's planning. And it also ties in with the commercial human space flight. Is that that sort of Joe Blogg kind of ticket? It's the mental and physical capacity and capability of your passengers, and there's going to have to be training. It can't just be like even just to go. You don't think so?
No. How would that work? Well, because the idea is to take you from your office to your office in Sydney or whatever it happens to be, because it's going to be very expensive, and therefore most people are going to do it for business, not for pleasure.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you get on it just like you get on an airliner today, but it only takes 45 minutes to get there rather than 12 hours or 9 hours or whatever it happens to be.
But with the increase in speed, which could have to be probably a reduction in weight and size, which reduces the size of what they can carry, people-wise, and so probably reduces the crew. Definitely for the commercial human space flight.
It depends what model you're starting with, because if you have a crew of 2, you don't need someone at the front all the time.
Okay.
You may say it's a trivial example, but I flew in Canada 20 years ago. Okay, commercial flight from Edmonton city centre up to a place called Cold Lake. And the chap who checked me in when I checked in my ticket took my bags from me, told me to put them on the trolley, then collected the trolley, took the bags out of the aeroplane, loaded the aeroplane, came back and got us, gave us the flight demo with all the in-flight briefing and so forth, pointed out where the T-urn was and whatever. Then went up the front and flew the aeroplane for takeoff. So we've got to allow people like Musk with a fantastic vision of where they want to go, excuse the pun, but the space to make this work. When they've worked out what environment most people will be happy with, for instance, 2 or 3G, you'll notice it, but most people will just accept it. Once you go above 4, it starts to get quite difficult. So they've got to work out a system where the acceleration can be done in a way that they can maintain something that's acceptable while they get up to that speed and down again.
What was the fastest you went when you were flying?
Fastest? Yeah. Mach 2.
What was it like? What was the vibration like?
There's no real vibration.
No.
Really? No.
How come?
Well, because there isn't. It's just the airplane accelerates all the way relatively smooth. The only time we used to do a particular sortie in training to go supersonic. And we're all very excited, hilarity and all the rest of it. Actually, on the day it was the dial's gone to Mach 1.05, 1.1. There's a little bit of, but nothing to. It's a big event. When you think of the Chuck Yeagers, when they were doing it, the aeroplane was simply not designed in the way they're designed today. So when he went supersonic, the whole aeroplane was bucketing and banging all over the place.
Which was that? What planes was that? Sorry?
X-15s and things like that, with Americans built to go supersonic in the early days. Today it was like Concorde. We went to Mach 2, and you never realised you were doing more than 100 miles an hour. There's no feel in the difference.
Do you know what my reference point was when I asked that question? I shouldn't have asked it. My reference point was when I went very, 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 very fast in a very, very fast car once, and it was shaking.
Yeah. Probably more to do with the road than the car, actually.
I should have thought of the Concorde. Absolutely.
So I think it will be doable. I think there are some elements that still need to be worked through. Your point about weight, when you've got that amount of thrust going on down the back, the old extra handbag used to go in the overhead locker won't actually matter that much.
Yeah. So the thrust, the amount of the thrust involved, sort of, how do you measure thrust? What's it measured in?
Pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, the amount of the thrust going on. So the G-force is due to this... Is that down to the speed?
No, it's down to the acceleration.
The acceleration.
It's down to the acceleration. So when you are accelerating at 4G, then that's when you're feeling it, really in the gut and blood starts draining from the head and all that sort of stuff and so forth. But you can actually hold up to, with a bit of training, which I don't suspect these people are going to want to have, because they want to come straight out of their office, get on this thing and go.
Well, not for the city,
yeah.
No, for, country to country, but go on, sorry.
But for anything else, then certainly we used to fly around at 6G, with just a very basic pair of inflatable trousers on that you push the blood out of your legs back up and so forth.
Yeah.
But most of the time you could hold that just by breathing in. Now, of course, they have complete suits where they can do 9G on a regular basis, and that thing you do is just carry on breathing normally, and it takes care of for you. So it might be that passengers have to put a suit on of some form, okay? Well, when you get on an aeroplane, if you turn left occasionally at the gangway rather than always turning right, often they'll give you a pair of pyjamas to wear overnight on long-distance trips now. It's just the same thing. Yeah. You get on, put on this suit, plug it in, off you go.
What do the rockets pull? Like, what is it, like a satellite pull?
They're into 20-odd G, and then it comes down, of course. So, but that's because you're trying to go vertical from the start.
Yeah.
I go back to this point. If he tries that... then I would. He is talking about.
No, I was just thinking of commercial space flight. I was thinking of space tourism. Question for you. The long arm centrifuge, was it enjoyable?
Yeah. The centrifuge is never enjoyable.
It doesn't look it.
No, it's one of those things that you. It's really about giving you the experience. It's like. Also, we used to go up in compression chambers to go up to the point where you're up at. I'll get this right in a minute. I think it was about 42,000 feet, and then you would decompress back down to rapidly.
Yeah.
And then you would take your oxygen mask off. And the whole point was to show you what happened, and the fact that what happens to you will be different to what happens to me.
What happened to you?
Because it would be things like you'd be able to do mathematical calculations, and then all of a sudden, instead of doing 2 + 2 = 4, you'd have 2 + 2 = 1 or 103 or something.
Really?
Because your other people end up singing Doolally when they. And the point is to try and train you to recognise that in yourself. So if suddenly there's not a big explosion, but you're having an oxygen leak or the oxygen's not coming through or something like that, you can recognise, hang on, I remember this. This is me. What the heck's going on? And do something about it and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's understanding the human body and how it reacts to these things is why the centrifuge is important. So you can see what happens if you don't do the right techniques when you're pulling G. And if you're not straining before the modern G suits came in, then you would at some stage pass out. No question about that. Mm-hmm. But now, as I say, with the suits they've now got, 9G is not a big issue.
But yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting.
Well, if your was it your sister who flew in the Hawk?
Yeah.
If she'd have pulled 6G, I guarantee she'd have been greyed out, if not blacked out.
Well, the reason I asked about the centrifuge, going back to Blue Abyss, so that's what they built the centrifuge and parabolic flight as well. But so in looking at all of that stuff. I was looking when you talk about the breathing, when you that hard acceleration, those high G's you pull in, you need to exhale, don't you?
Yes, ideally.
Is that to release the pressure on your
short,
organs?
Sharp bursts.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the way you get around that, and that keeps the blood and the oxygen flowing for those short times while you're pulling that. I mean, you don't want to pull it for more than 10 seconds or something each time, and then you've got to find some way of relieving it. So you do lots of grunting and groaning when you short, sharp breath in, breath out, so that you keep the whole body running and you keep the oxygen and the blood flowing all the time.
For the Jaguars, what speed was takeoff speed?
About 150, 160.
What's the technical term for takeoff speed? I just realised it's probably going to, when you become...
You're talking about the way that the civil world talks about V1, V2 and rotate.
Okay.
Don't do that in the military. You have a stop speed at which you cannot stop, and you have a go speed at which you can go. And if the two are that far apart, you have to think about it.
It's 1:30.
Is it really?
It is. It's flown by. It's flown by. Is there anything? We're coming to the end of it now, so I'm going to wrap it up. But if there's anything you want to mention, or anybody, or anything you want to mention, or say, whatever. This is your shameless plug opportunity, which I give to everyone. If not, it's not a problem. It's cool.
I mean, I think the greatest decision that was made for me was the opportunity when I wanted to become a pilot, was sending me to university first. I absolutely think that was... I would never have done it, because I hated school the time I finished it. I just couldn't see why we were doing all this academic stuff and stuff. I knew what I wanted to do, and let me get on with it. Do you know, it was 3 years where I learnt a lot about me, but also had a fantastic opportunity to do some things, and then led to me being a much, I think, better person by the time I got into the Air Force. So all I would say to anybody who's thinking about going to this thing, university is one of those places in the world that I think is a great learning ground. And if you get the opportunity and you're capable of doing it, because I recognise now there are people being pushed that way that actually shouldn't be pushed that way, I'd go and do it. But also, I have a passion for aviation. I've always had it since I was 13, when my father sent me on a birthday trip on a thing called a Rapide, which is an old biplane from the 1930s, and for 30 minutes. And I kept looking down